from London, all the way from London, England, and I am on the OWASP Global Board. So if you have any questions about OWASP board, how OWASP works, please come and talk to me, because I know how OWASP works inside and out now. Been around for many, many years. And most important question before I start my presentation, how many people by the show of hands are OWASP members? Right, so don't forget, you have to vote now. You only have 1 week, the clock is ticking, right? And this year we have an unprecedented number of board candidates. We have 14 people competing for 4 board seats. And may I remind you that OWASP Global Board consists of community members. So all you have to do to become a global board member is to be a continuous OWASP member for 12 months and apply. And we have 14 people applying this year, so please study all the pages of the candidates and vote before October 30th. Now, as mentioned, myself, my name is Sam, come all the way from London. Originally, I'm a developer, currently working as an application security architect and consultant in the city of London, and board member since 2024. So all around, I'm an application defender, right? So why am I presenting a talk about something which consists of words network and attacker if I'm application defender, right? So there's a bit of story about that, but before we go into the story, again, by the show of hands, how many people were aware of this movie attack? You guys use this for file transfer? Huge attack, right? Citrix bleed. I'm pretty sure anyone working in the government or enterprise, you guys use Citrix? When this thing happened, it was huge, right? The number one problem was people trying to figure out how many of these Citrix devices we have on the network, where are they? Are they patched? Are they vulnerable, right? All these questions. Ivanti, another very popular solution for VPN and for mobile, previously known as Mobile Iron, right? Lots of organizations use it. Again, tons of vulnerabilities. US government and CISA warning. All the federal agencies must patch urgently because there are critical vulnerabilities. And speaking of OWASP Top 10, that was a SQL injection. It's still 25 years old, we still have SQL injection. And there's another SQL injection in another package called Crush FTP. How many people use Crush FTP for file transfer and SCP? Again, that was a big, big vulnerability. So what if I told you that OWASP has a project which can help you to scan your network and find all these vulnerable devices and more, right? And it's free and open source, just like all OWASP projects. So here's my story with Nettacker, because I had no idea about this project until 2018, when I had a message from the original OWASP Nettacker project leaders who were supposed to come to London. So in London, we have our own version of Black Hat Europe, which usually happens in December. And these guys, they said, sorry, we have some travel issues. We cannot get to London in time. And we have a slot at Black Hat Europe. So you guys at OWASP London chapter, can you help us out and go and present this project? It was like, yeah, sure, we're more than happy to help. We have no idea what this thing is. Like, can you tell us? So we got on a Zoom call. For about 3 hours, I learned the version 001 of this project, and I loved it so much. And myself and Dr. Greg Frakos, we went on stage in Black Hat Europe in front of thousands of people at the Arsenal track. We had our demo booth, and then this happened. We had huge crowds of people gathering and looking at the screens like, what is this thing? And it's free. And then we decided to repeat it in 2019. And again, even bigger crowd of security engineers gathered to look at the screen as I was doing my live demo. So what is Nettacker? Why is it bringing all these crowds and you here in the audience? So you're here because you probably don't know about this project. But if you look at the OWASP GitHub organization, you will see that we're currently number 6. So number 1 OWASP project on GitHub is actually Cheat Sheet series. And Nettacker is now number 6 based on the number of stars. So it's the 6th most star repo. So what it is, OWASP is an open source software tool, just like all OWASP projects. We are a free and open source tool, but it was designed to help you with information gathering and penetration testing, and help you automate it. And what is really cool about Nettacker, why I love this project and became a project leader of it, is that it's written in 100% Python. It doesn't use any external tools. It doesn't use Nmap for port scanning. It doesn't use SQL map. It doesn't use anything. It's just pure Python, which makes it very very easy to run on different platforms, right, in terms of compatibility. Another very interesting thing about Nettacker is that it was written by students who participated in Google Summer of Code. So if any of you are a student in the audience or you know someone who's a student, I encourage you to talk to them about Google Summer of Code, because Google Summer of Code is an initiative by Google, which is a kind of a paid internship, because Google is actually allowing students to spend their summer breaks, the 3 months, June, July, and August, to work on an open source project of their choice, and they get paid by Google. So OWASP participates every year, right? We have lots of projects benefiting from Google Summer of Code, and that includes our project, OWASP Nettacker project. So Nettacker can be thought of as a Swiss Army knife. Just like a Swiss Army knife, it's a collection of tools. So it has a modular structure, and just like with Swiss Army knife, you can pull out different blades out of knife. Same thing you can do with Nettacker. You pull different blades and say, yeah, I want to use this or that particular tool. And it has a very interesting feature because you can create profiles and you can bundle modules together. So you can pull several blades out of Swiss Army knife and you can use them together, which is really, really cool. It's all automatable, so you can automate and run it from the command line, GitHub Action, or from your favorite pipeline tool. And what is also very, very cool, because I don't think other scanners have this feature, but we have a built-in database and we have a built-in API in Web UI. So with other tools like Nmap, for example, you scan something and you lost that information. If you didn't save it, it's gone. With Nettacker, that's not the case. Every single scan is stored in a database, and we can scale up to different databases. It starts with a SQLite, which comes bundled with the tool, but you can connect it to MySQL or to Postgres in your enterprise and use it on the enterprise level. And of course, Web UI is great because you can query. Now, question number one, which I get asked all the time, saying, Sam, what's the difference between OWASP Nettacker and Burp Suite or ZAP? And here's the difference, because other vulnerability scanners, they scan only one website for many web application vulnerabilities, whatever the scanner is able to find. So for example, using Burp Suite, it will crawl the website, it will find all the buttons, all the forms, you know, all the URLs, and it will try to then run different payloads on all these discovered and crawled URLs and forms and buttons to discover vulnerabilities, right? And AKA, this is a DAST tool. The OWASP Nettacker is different. So we don't scan just one website. We can scan one website if you ask it to scan website. But we can scan one or many, and that can be hundreds or thousands of IP addresses, networks, or subdomains. And what are we scanning them for? We're scanning them for open ports, and then one or more specific vulnerabilities, which are listed by the user, right? And you can bundle them together in our profiles. But also it can do brute forcing, which is also very, very important. Where can you find Nettacker? On OWASP website. If you go to owasp.org/Nettacker, you will find the information about the tool there. It's also on GitHub, so github.com/owasp/Nettacker is our home on OWASP's GitHub. We also have an official Docker container image, so you can find it on Docker Hub. Again, very easy if you search for owasp/Nettacker, or you can run it using docker run owasp/Nettacker, or pull the image using docker pull command. Another interesting fact that Nettacker is currently included in Black Arch Linux. And Black Arch Linux is a specialist distribution for penetration testers. So I was really, really happy when I discovered that Black Arch decided to include our tool. Hopefully next year we can get it included in Kali Linux as well. Now, the thing about Nettacker is you need to understand how it works. It has modules of 3 different types, so you can perform 3 different types of tasks. It has a modules of type scan, so you can scan for something. For example, you can perform a port scan. It also has modules of type vuln, so it's used specifically for vulnerability testing. So for example, Apache Struts vulnerability, we'll be looking for a specific vulnerability, and obviously we also have all the vulnerability modules with CVE in them as well, so you can scan for a specific CVE, your entire network. or networks, and we have modules of type brute. So these are for brute forcing. So for example, SSH brute will perform brute forcing using SSH protocol. We have lots of scan modules. Again, I'm not going to list them all, but for example, some of the modules that I highlighted here, for example, things like admin scan module will try to find any administrative or control panels on the targets, right? Whatever it is able to scan. We also have an interesting module called PMA scan. So if you know what PMA is, it's PHP MyAdmin. PHP MyAdmin is the very popular open source control panel for MySQL database. The thing is that lots of websites, lots of web applications all around the world, they have it included and installed for the ease of administration. And a lot of them don't have the credentials enabled. So they work on default credentials, or it's accessible without credentials. So you can, for example, use it to perform this kind of scans to scan any administrative control panels. You can also perform a directory brute forcing. So again, it's quite similar to tools like GoBuster to find folders such as .git, .svn, and some other interesting folders where, like backup folders, where developers or DevOps guys accidentally may have left some of the sensitive information. We have specific modules for scanning WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal CMS as well. Lots of vulnerability modules. I'm not going to go through them. Obviously, Citrix Heartbleed is probably one of the most interesting ones. One that I want to bring your attention to is something called SSL expired certificate vulnerability. Again, how many times we hear about a very simple but very popular reason for downtime that people just forget to renew their certificates. Happens all the time. And obviously, Nettacker can help you scan your entire network and discover any devices which will have, or servers which have expired SSL certificate. And these are all our brute forcing modules. So we can brute force using FTP, HTTP basic auth, HTTP form, NTLM, SMTP, SSH, Telnet, WordPress XML RPC module. So if you have WordPress running on your website, we can brute force and find the credentials which are used to log into your WordPress. Or we have a brand new module which can also perform brute forcing using SMB. Now, Nettacker originally was called IoT Scan, OWASP IoT Scan project. It got renamed to Nettacker back in 2017. But the idea of Nettacker when it was created, it was the Internet of Things scanner. The idea was you scan your network for IoT devices, then you scan the IoT devices for open ports, and then you brute force scan them. So you can find anything with default credentials, for example, admin. And I use Nettacker to scan a very large London-based bank, investment bank, which had thousands of CCTV cameras all around their offices, their buildings. And I managed to find out of thousands of cameras, 20 cameras which had admin as credentials. So anyone from around the world could have connected to these cameras, entered admin as a username, admin as a password, right? And started watching what's going on inside that bank, which is obviously not good, but here you go. We have a free and open source project which can help you address that issue. Now, I will be showing you a live demo today. I really like showing things live, but before I move on to the live demo, there's always a responsible use wording, because you need to remember that OWASP Nettacker is an offensive security tool. It's just like any offensive security tools. Make sure before you run it, you have permission to run it on that network. So it can be used by bug bounty hunters, can be used by penetration testers. You can use it inside your own networks. Make sure you obtain a permission. Now, how do you run Nettacker, right? You need to have two things to run Nettacker. You need to define the target, and you need to define the module, right? What are you scanning, and what are you scanning it with, okay? Now, Nettacker is great because we have different ways how you can define your targets. So for example, here, you can see that I can scan just one IP address, just like any other scanner. So 192.168.1.149 is one IP address. But we can also scan the whole network. So if I give it /24, we can scan 255 IP addresses, right? On top of that, these are all the different ways how you can define the target. So it can be a single IP address, an IP range, when you give it a starting IP and ending IP, CIDR notation, your /24/16 networks, which could be thousands and thousands of devices inside your network. Another cool thing, you can define a domain name, for example, OWASP.org. Nettacker will discover and scan all the subdomains of that domain. So imagine like yourcompany.com. Nettacker will find all the subdomains wherever they are hosted, Amazon, Azure, Google, wherever, your own provider, and it will scan them. And also you can give it a specific URL in HTTP or HTTPS format, right? There's another cool thing about Nettacker, that it can load the list of targets from a text file. So every enterprise usually has multiple networks and multiple domain names. So it's easy for an attacker. You just create a text file and define on every single line either a network range, right, or a domain name. For example, here, OWASP has OWASP.org, OWASP.com, here, and it also has a Class C IP network, which is 255 addresses. So I can load that text file and scan everything that we have at OWASP, okay? And another cool thing about Nettacker, as I mentioned, you can pull out several blades out of your Swiss Army knife. So you can use multiple scan modules at the same time, which is very, very cool. You can chain them, and all you have to do is just add a comma between the modules, okay? And to do the subdomain scan, there is a -S command line switch, which basically tells Nettacker to perform the scan that you define on all the subdomains of the domain. So here you can see that we have as our target OWASP.org, because, by the way, because OWASP has a bug bounty program on Bugcrowd, for those of you who don't know, security researchers are allowed to scan OWASP.org's assets, network assets. So permission is given through the bug bounty. And here I define, I want to find all the subdomains of OWASP.org and then perform a port scanner and something called server version vulnerability. So server version is usually leaked by several HTTP servers. For example, Nginx or Apache or IIS, they add their own server header in responses, and it is information that can be useful for attackers, because if they know exactly which version of Apache or Nginx or IIS you're running, they will try to find exploits for that particular version. This is why a lot of people usually drop that server banner from the responses of their servers. But this is just a one-liner, how you can perform this kind of scan. So, and another thing before I show you the demo is if you cannot remember the names of the modules, again, it's very simple because we have predefined profiles. So predefined profile called info will perform information gathering, right? So it will not try any vulnerability scans. The scan will run all the scanning modules. Brute will scan all the brute forcing modules, and vuln will run all the vulnerability modules on your targets. SSL perform all the SSL attacks, so that's your weak ciphers, expiring certificate in 30 days, devices with SSL certificates already expired. WP will perform all the scans of WordPress, so if there are any WordPress content management systems in your network, you will want to run that. Citrix will run all the scans and vulnerability tests on Citrix devices, Ivanti on Ivanti, and we have one profile type called all, which means you use all our modules. We have over 120 modules now. That will take some time to scan, of course, but again, if you want to perform a comprehensive scan, that is what you would do. Okay, let me now switch to the command line and see if I can make my screen a little bit bigger so you all can read it. Okay, so if I run Nettacker with no parameters, as you can see, I hope this is visible. I'll make the screen a little bit bigger as well. It will say cannot specify the targets. So let me try what I was showing before. If I just give it OWASP.org, right, and I will say, okay, perform a, for example, a port scan, okay, and I'll say, okay, tell me if the ports 22, 80, or 443 are open. Again, if I don't define any ports, it will scan for 1,000 most frequently used ports, right? So, okay, here I forgot to define the -g parameter, yeah, because obviously that's how you define the ports. And when Nettacker starts, you can see that it loads all the modules. So currently I have about 170 modules. It also defines the specific, each scan has a unique ID. And remember, I told you about the database, right? So every single scan will be stored in a database. And here we can have the results of the OWASP.org scan. But obviously, this is not useful because this is just the main website. What I can do as well is I can perform a similar scan on all the subdomains of OWASP.org. Now, just doing a port scan is probably not as interesting because obviously there will be a lot of it. Let me see if we can also perform a scan which will give us HTML titles of any of the pages that we can discover. And you will see why this is useful. So let me try and run this HTTP HTML title scan. Again, I will first try to run it on just one domain. The Wi-Fi here is actually quite sketchy, even though I tried it because obviously it's a live demo. Let me see if the thing is working. So it might be a little bit slow because of the Wi-Fi connection. Obviously, if you have a good Wi-Fi, it should work much quicker. All right, let's see if we can maybe switch to another Wi-Fi. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go. So you can see here it performed a port scan and told me that where do we have the specific any pages for the title, and it actually found one on port 8080, which is very interesting. Okay, so we now know that OWASP.org has something running on port 8080. But what I can now do, I can add subdomains here, and in order to make it run a bit faster, you can see it was a bit slow, I can define how many threads I want and how many threads per domain I want, for example, like this. And I also define a timeout for it to wait for at least 5 seconds when it will try to connect and get me a subdomains. Let me actually see if I can switch to another Wi-Fi network, to this NCC1, because the presenter network seems to be quite slow. Okay, let me try this. Hopefully this will be a bit faster. There you go. You can see what's happening now. Nettacker is performing information gathering about subdomains. So it's going out to different sources, which will tell us what are the OWASP subdomains. You can see some of them are already appearing there. You can see there's OCMS, there's lists, there's this one, and you can see it now found 97 subdomains on OWASP.org domain. And it is now going to perform a scan on all of these 97 domains. This is what is 97 subdomains. What is really cool is that you don't have to manually enumerate them or use another tool. You can, of course, and for example, OWASP will work together with other domain enumeration tools, and that will be, for example, with OWASP AMAS, right? AMAS is quite a famous enumeration tool. Yep. Let me now see. For some reason, the speed of it is still not quite working. Let me try something else. Let me try to do a server version vulnerability. Okay, and let me try it here. Yeah, there you go. Right, again, as you can see, the first thing that it does, it performs discovery of all the subdomains. This time, I think it found a few more subdomains, so it discovered 108 targets. Still doesn't quite like this Wi-Fi, which is fine. I'll show you how we can do it on a web module in a minute. So one interesting thing about Nettacker, once it finds the, let me just try to do another module. Let's see if we can do this one. Because we have yeah, there you go, this is a little bit better. There you go. So this is a scan of all the OWASP subdomains which have a web server running. And you can see there are lots of them. You can see Brainbreak, DSOM, Mass, BLT, GenAI, Developer's Guide, Top 10, right? So, and it showed us all the HTTP status response codes. Now, what you can see here is that it says the report was saved into an HTML file and database. So let me see if I can open that HTML file. And you can see this is the result of the test. It shows us in a tabular format all its findings. I can make it a bit bigger like that. And as I move my mouse over, you can see about every single resource that it discovered belonging to OWASP. It showed us its headers, and it's showing us what was the HTTP status. And at the top of it, we also will have the list of all the subdomains discovered. Now, another cool thing about Nettacker, what it can do, is if you bundle several modules together, it will show you this graph, which can be very, very useful because the Nettacker will only show you the result if it found a successful response, right? Because it sends a payload and explains the response. So for example, the server version vuln will return a response if it actually found an exposed HTTP server which is exposing this version, right? And you can see by each subdomain which particular server has this vulnerability. These graphs can be very, very useful. The output that you saw in the text format, we also have a module which shows the different version numbers. Why is it important? Because, for example, for movie transfer here, there can be lots of CVEs, and it's very difficult for us because we're a very small team of volunteers to constantly maintain and update all the CVE data, right? However, to make your life easier as the administrators of your networks, and if your CISO says, hey, do we have an unpatched version of movie transfer in our network, and say, hey, let me run this OWASP Nettacker free tool, and it will tell me about all the versions. And lo and behold, here, I scanned a very large telecom company in the United Kingdom, and I found that they had a movie transfer version 12.1, which is really, really vulnerable, still unpatched. So I had to call them and tell them about this. But of course, if you are in bug bounty or in penetration testing, this is, again, a very useful tool to discover without searching for specific CVE. Here you can also use Nettacker for a specific CVE. So I searched the whole network, and I found that there was one device which was vulnerable to Ivantia ICS CVE 2023-46805. Right? Again, so this is, again, very useful because of how easy it is to scan everything and just find the specific CVE. Again, if there's a question from your CISO, do we have this vulnerability? Where is it? Similarly, because it's quite difficult to catch up with all the CVEs, we have a very useful module which tells you what is the last patched date. And we are using a very simple but very effective techniques because there's a file on Ivanti devices which is updated every time whenever the new version is released. So by just checking the last modified date on this resource, I can tell you exactly the patch dates. So there you go. You can see that, again, I scanned a network of a large bank and then discovered that they had 2 devices which were left unpatched since 2022, right? So obviously they will be vulnerable and they need patching. Speaking of Nettacker reports, right? Nettacker can provide reports in text, HTML, JSON, and also, most importantly, CSV formats. So for example, the same report that you saw here, if I add -o and I just say OWASP-report.csv, it will do exactly the same scan, but it will save the report in CSV format. And I know obviously people have love and hate relationship with spreadsheets, but project managers, they love spreadsheets, right? It wouldn't be great that every morning you'll get a spreadsheet that you can access, and it will tell you exactly all the subdomains you have, all the technologies that you run, all the open ports on them, right? It's your inventory of everything that you have. And this is possible. You can see here, CSV file has been saved, and we can open it to see what's inside. Now, why is it great? Because you don't need to constantly be logged in to Nettacker. You just can get the spreadsheet, and you can filter it, and you can see what are the devices on your network, what are the open ports, what are they running, which technologies. If you run brute force attack, you can see which devices responded to default credentials, such as admin. So yeah, spreadsheet is a manager's dream. No need to log into anything. Another cool thing about Nettacker is it has a web UI and API. So if we start Nettacker with a -- start API command, let me just type it here, -- start API. Nettacker switches into the API web UI mode, which means it is now accessible using a web browser. So it gives us an API key here, which I can copy, and then let me just go and open our localhost port 5000. By default, Nettacker runs on port 5000, but obviously you can make it run on any port you want. You will see our web UI here. It will not work until you give it an API key. Once you give it an API key, you're logged in. And when it's great here, it will show you the results of all the previous scans, right? You see, I've run all these scans. And again, I can just click on them. It will give me the report. You can see here, this was the CSV report that I've just generated in my previous scan. And here is our OWASP.org. I'm pretty sure our IT director would be very happy to see all the assets that we have and OWASP.org. So that is there, which is really, really useful. And another great thing is that we have a search engine, because obviously all the results are saved in the database. And again, here, for example, let me see if I can search for WordPress. There you go. You can see out of all the hundreds of domains that OWASP owns, I just found the one which is running on WordPress, and that's genai.owasp.org, our GenAI project. So you can basically query the database for anything. For example, I want to find out which servers that OWASP owns run Nginx or which run any particular technology. We can always just perform a search. For example, on PHP, you can see the cloud OWASP.org and wiki.owasp.org, austin.owasp.org, and genai.owasp.org. They all include PHP in the response headers, which means they are running this technology. So this is how easy it is, and you have the web UI there included. Now, some other things that you can do in web UI. You can also submit a new scan, right? And we have this color coding. So all the scan modules, they're all color-coded green, so they're safe to run. All the vulnerability modules, they are color-coded red, which means they will be sending a payload which are testing for vulnerabilities, so you need permission for that. And we have the orange ones for the brute force attacks of Nettacker. Now, back in 2017, there was this tweet from Jeremiah Grossman, our OWASP veteran and legend, and the guy who set up White Hat Security back in the day. And he was saying, I suggest that OWASP top 10 includes A0 or asset inventory, because these days the biggest AppSec risk are websites you don't know you own, right? Because there's shadow ITs everywhere. We have cloud, and your developers might be spinning up different systems in AWS and other clouds without your knowledge. And why is it important? Because if you don't know what you own, you cannot possibly secure it. So always start from asset inventory. And up until now, OWASP didn't have a tool which could provide you an inventory of your network. And now we do have it, and that's our Nettacker. Now, you can also automate it, right? And automation of Nettacker can be done in different ways. You can, for example, use it in GitHub Action using container image. So it's quite easy if you just say that your Nettacker scan runs on Ubuntu latest, and here's the container, and you can define OWASP/Nettacker and define the version. I have an example in my GitHub account how you can create a GitHub action to perform automated scans. I actually have a GitHub action which runs the scan periodically on OWASP.org, so we can see what's going on. Now, what is really cool about Nettacker, that it has a scan comparison feature. So, for example, I perform one scan that says, okay, OWASP has all these subdomains, all these open ports, all these technologies, okay? So using the scan ID, we can remember that scan as the baseline scan and run a new scan, and it will only return the results which are different from the baseline scan. So we can answer these questions. Are there any new hosts detected on my networks and subdomains? Are there any new or unusual open ports on my networks and subdomains? Are there any new vulnerabilities detected on my networks and subdomain? Are there any new trivial passwords detected on my services? For example, anything responding to admin as username and password. Are there any expired or expiring SSL certificates on my network and subdomains? This is all you can now answer using the free and open source tool. So all the documentation that we for Nettacker is located on nettacker.docs.io. So this is our new home for all the documents. And I'm very pleased to say that Nettacker was one of 6 projects which got a grant from OpenAI. We received $10,000 in OpenAI API credits to use Codex, which is OpenAI's vibe coding tool, which we are using now to perform reviews and improve Nettacker. So again, if you are unaware, if any of you run an OWASP project or an open source project, you can apply for the OpenAI open source grant. I left the QR code on the screen, and it's called Codex Open Source Fund, and you can get up to $25,000 in OpenAI API credits. So no more paying with your personal credit cards, because obviously OpenAI recognizes the importance of open source, and really happy to report that we were one of the first 6 projects, along with VLLM, Pulumi, and Daxter, who were chosen by OpenAI to provide us with this grant. Now, Nettacker is very simple to install. I invite you to go back and try it in your networks. You can just do docker pull OWASP Nettacker. If you want the latest bleeding version, the development version, you can add dev to get the development image. If you're running on Python, you can just do pip install Nettacker, and it will install from PyPy registry. And then you can just run Nettacker command with --help, which will give you information about all the different options. Now, a bit of caveat, because at the moment, Nettacker doesn't work on Python 3.13, because there are some compatibility issues with SSL module, because there are several libraries that Python 3.13 is no longer including because they were deprecated, and that creates a conflict. But we're currently working on making sure that Nettacker works on the latest versions of Python as well. And again, with Python, it's quite easy to create an environment with other versions, for example, using pyenv command. That's relatively easy. How Nettacker modules are structured, they're all based on YAML. So it's very easy. You don't have to be a developer to create them. And I'll give you an interesting example of how one organizations were using it, because they were using to perform retests of the pen tests, because they get their annual pen test and they get their findings. And then the findings, they'll say, OK, if you send this particular payload to this URL, this is the response that we're getting, and that response indicates that there is a vulnerability. So they go to their developers, and the developers say, we think we've fixed this vulnerability. And then the organization has, OK, do I now have to pay the same fee to the penetration testing company to perform a retest to confirm that I can now close this risk, right? And they started using Nettacker, and they created their own custom modules, and they can now run this on the whole network to confirm that this vulnerability is gone, and you can do it as well. And obviously, because this is all open source, I invite you to join this project if you're interested and help us out. Please do contribute. OWASP is on the main GitHub page, so it is OWASP/Nettacker on GitHub. We are always open to all the contribution. And that's my talk. So OWASP Nettacker, go and attack your own network before the real attackers do. Thank you. I think I have some time for Q&A, right?
Yeah, we have 10 minutes for questions if anyone wants to ask. Raise a hand.
Are any of your customers using the Nettacker output to then put into their CMDB so that it can then determine if there's missing configuration items or
Yes.
assign a security risk score?
Yes, the answer is yes. And they just use a CSV output and they can just import it back into their CMDB. And that's exactly one of the reasons why it is so useful. And again, so there are smaller organizations like small and medium businesses who don't even have a CMDB. And I know they use Nettacker to scan all the assets, to generate a spreadsheet every day, and obviously that CSV file, and that is their CMDB. They'll say, this is all that we have. And we have a special module which is called Web Technology, so it will perform a scan and will tell you if you're running JavaScript, jQuery, PHP, ASP.NET, right? So you can create this monster spreadsheet with all your assets and then filter it. So if you need to find a quick answer to any questions, you can do it. Any more questions? The question that I also usually get, which I'm not sure if you're familiar, there's another similar tool which is called Nuclei, and I get asked very frequently, what is the difference between Nettacker and Nuclei? And again, the main difference is that Nuclei from Project Discovery scans URLs. So you have to feed it the list of URLs, not networks. So this is the main difference. And another one, that Nettacker has a built-in database. So none of your scans are ever lost. They're all searchable. They all sit in the database. You can always get back to them. And if anything was discovered, you will find it in the database. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Give them a round of applause, everybody.